Well, good morning and welcome to Life and Learning Week. My name is Brigitte from HR, and I would like to welcome you to Life and Learning Week. This week is devoted to healthy bodies and engaged minds. So first off, we need a safety moment. In the unlikely event of an emergency, if you have to exit the building, you would just go out this door and turn to the left, and then there's the stairwell. Go walk the stairs all the way down, and then the muster point is at the Devon building. So this is Paul Theriault, and he's going to engage us in healthy aging and natural beauty. So welcome.
Hi.
Oh, and there's a sign-up sheet for anyone who signs it. Your name will be entered into a draw. So those of you who have came in late, just make sure you sign before you leave. And I'll just put it up here. Thank you.
Hi. So hi everybody. So I recognize a good chunk of you, so it's nice to meet you all. So I'm Dr. Paul Theriault. I am a naturopathic doctor, and I practice, I used to practice down south by Heritage in McLeod, and now I practice very close to here. I practice on 12th Ave and Edmonton Trail. And I moved because there's a clinic in my clinic chain that had an empty room, and that is a 10-minute walk from my house, and so it was super awesome. So I'm a lot closer to here than I used to be, and yes, about me, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I was just talking about this earlier. So for those of you who can see, I just turned 30, but I look like I'm like 22 or something. So this is predisposed against me, because I know a number of my patients in the past have been kind of doubting that I know what I'm talking about because I look so young. So I decided to turn that into an advantage and start doing cosmetic stuff. So in which case looking like you're 22 is actually an advantage. So anyway, yeah, no, I practice a lot. I do a lot of digestive health. I do a lot of mental emotional healing. I'm starting to do more practical things. This year I'm going to be taking a course called prolotherapy, where it's basically injecting into ligaments and joints to stabilize them if they're too loose and to regenerate cartilage and things. And yeah, no, a lot of other things like advanced detoxification. And I just started studying naturopathic cosmetic procedures. So that's what I'm doing a presentation on today. And it's really, I love you guys. I've been presenting here for about 2 years. So if you go go to YouTube and you sort of look at my name, Paul Theriault Naturopathic, and my cards are over there. So if you need help in spelling my francophone last name, that'll help you. But and there's apparently a Paul Theriault in Spain who's like a really enthusiastic soccer announcer. So if you just Google Paul, or if you just look up Paul Theriault, that's who comes up. Paul Theriault Naturopathic, I come up. Most of my presentations here or that I've done here are there. And it's quite interesting that I'm presenting to you guys today, because it's election day and I'm presenting to a government regulator, and it's really funny actually. My opinion is split in Alberta. Many people are like this. Other people thinking the NDP are winning. So, and it's funny. Election day, it is really the revenge of the 5th. So, anyway, I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist that. It's like, oh, may the 4th be with you. No, it's the revenge of the 5th. So, anyway, if you guys have any questions or anything pops up in the middle of the presentation, just feel free to interrupt me or throw something. And if I start talking too fast, just remind me. That's kind of a bad habit of mine. So, this is a presentation pretty much on like natural aging and beauty. This is a pretty interesting topic in our society. What do you guys think constitutes beautiful? Shout it out. There's no wrong answer.
Health.
Health, personality.
Joy.
Joy. See, and all of those are actually quite accurate. But physically, what constitutes a beautiful person is actually really culturally relativistic. So, a bit more about me. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary in biology and cultural anthropology. So that gave me a really good insight both into how different medical systems can think really differently about things and still, be effective, and other things like attractiveness and beauty and so forth. So very culturally, so in terms of what we consider beautiful at a general place, there's a broad human consensus about what is beautiful, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But there's a lot of variation on that, which is very time and place specific, and often specific to more local cultural values and things like that, which can be quite variable. So humans, even in like very poor places and poor contexts in which we didn't have a lot of resources available to ourselves, have always tried to make ourselves beautiful. And we've done this in a variety of ways. Some cultures, it's tattooing, particularly in Polynesia. They're considered like they're considered very beautiful and very noble and so forth. In our culture today, we've started doing that again. Tattoos are a big thing nowadays. Another thing is scarification. So in a number of cultures, there are, like, they'll give you scars and things like that, and those scars have particular meanings that are specific to the context of that culture. And one that almost everyone does is hairstyling. Like, look, I put hair goop in my hair today. That's an aesthetic thing. Many of you dye your hair or do your hair in specific ways. So that's another thing like that. So it was always kind of like, in many cultures, if you weren't particularly wealthy, it was often kind of a half-assed thing to make yourself beautiful. Like maybe you'd comb your hair, and maybe you'd get yourself all made up on your wedding day and so forth. But much of the time, it was a pretty basic thing. Our culture since World War II, has become quite a bit wealthier, and with this newly found wealth that's been pretty widely distributed, we've spent a lot more time on making ourselves pretty. And in addition to that, our culture's become far more medically advanced. We are able to do a lot more in terms of our health and in terms of like more invasive medical procedures, and this is kind of played out into that just because there's a market. People have more disposable income, they're gonna try and make themselves look prettier. Like, it's been true throughout human history and it's true now, but the only difference now is wealth is far more widely distributed. It's not like just the 1%, as Occupy would say, who have the money to dispose on that. Most of us can afford a little bit of money to make ourselves pretty. So that brings up an interesting question, however, is we're making ourselves more, like if we're modifying our bodies to make ourselves more beautiful, according to what standard are we considering beauty? So I've got some photos here. These are all real people. Oh, here we go. So standards of beauty, yeah, we've kind of gone into this. In our culture, we tend to favor a few things: youth and thinness. Most cultures find actually a few other things attractive. They find various signs of reproductive fitness. Like in women, they tend to be good skin, they tend to be like energy, they tend to be like, you know, hips that are a bit wider than the waist and so forth, which despite being a boy, I have. So it's funny. Yay, gay hormones. But other signs of wealth and power as well. Like in a lot of cultures, obesity is considered quite attractive. Not just obesity in terms of like anything, but like morbid obesity is really hot. I remember one ethnography by Nina Shostak, and or was it Nina? No, it wasn't Nina Shostak, it was somebody else. It was a woman who was studying nutrition in Mali, and she had this friend there who was like a supermodel beauty queen, and she weighed like 350 pounds. And she was like, I am so sexy, you skinny white girl, you need to get like sexier and get fat and so forth. Like then your husband will like love you to death. So it was love. So, and that was because wealth in that culture means you can have as much to eat as you want. There's not a food scarcity, so if wealth translates as access to food and you're obese, you're loaded. And that's considered attractive there. It means you're wealthy and rich and everything else. Our culture does things a little bit differently. So, let's see. Our own culture varies a very certain set of characteristics. So these are people, this is a group of people who've like just decided to alter themselves cosmetically with a number of surgical procedures, and they're all real people. That is a real person. I think she's in the former Soviet Union and so forth. So people who kind of take this to the edge are demonstrative of our own standards of beauty. Who does this girl look like? Barbie. That was her goal, yeah.
Wow.
So she's a real human being. Yeah. That's our cultural standard. Same thing, former Soviet Union. A little bit less extreme, but like I don't even know how she got her eyes that big. Like I have big eyes, but not quite like that. Look at the facial expression too. I find that actually really interesting. Look at the facial expression. Just go back to the first one as well. Look at the facial expression. No depth, no smiling, no movement. There's a guy. Not quite as bad, but facial expression. These are the things that I notice. Like, yeah, great. Facial expression. Look at him. There's no wrinkles on that forehead, no signs of emotion anywhere. What do those three people have in common, aside from the things I pointed out?
They think they're beautiful.
Oh, they think they're beautiful indeed. I should hope they think they're beautiful after spending, like, each of those people spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars on cosmetic surgery. So.
They all have a doll-like face.
Doll-like face, and that's a key one. When we make toys and stuff, we kind of make them pretty, and so we kind of see our things writ large there. I perhaps should have brought up some of those pictures of like those Bratz dolls and things. Similar sorts of standards there. Big eyes, no facial expression, except maybe a slight smile. So, anyone else? All right, so our own culture, we are not immune. There are certain things that humans find almost universally attractive, but we have our own kind of interpretation of that that's based on our own cultural background. So in terms of that, we're based on our own cultural background. So in terms of that, there are a set of characteristics that we kind of put on to those universal human characteristics of beauty, which we'll discuss in a little bit. But the ones, and they tend to be really reflective of our cultural background. We kind of have, almost every last one of you is a woman. Since the 70s, there's been a big shift in terms of cultural attitudes towards women and women's idea of themselves and what they want to do in society, and kind of their encouraged rules and everything. But it hasn't really played out in terms of physical attractiveness just yet. So the basic things that we've looked at, these people are vapidity, like they're very manipulable. They're not existing for their own sake. They're existing for other people's. I mean, this is kind of played out the most in breast implants. I mean, most people with breast implants can't actually feel their breasts. Like, it kind of decreases sensitivity. So your breasts are not something for you, they're something for somebody else because you can't even feel them anymore. There's this thing here with a lack of depth. Most of it is, like, these beautiful people are considered to have, like, they have emotions, but they're not very deep emotions. They're like, kind of like, oh, I want this, or, oh, I'm a little sad about that. In terms of, like, greater amounts of, like, in terms of like more refined emotions or deeper ones, like more reflection on one's life, those are strongly discouraged. Innocence, in another word, being able, like, not having kind of adult thoughts and you know, thinking deeply through your actions and so forth. And a big thing being out of sync with biology. Like, it's basically turning you to that frozen shape that's not reflective of biological reality at all. So, in other words, kind of all those very beautiful people, they're kind of the embodiment of what, you know, in the 70s and kind of nowadays they call the patriarchy. It's like, that's what, you know, a male society wanted in an ideal female partner. Someone who was young looking, who could reproduce, who had these certain proportions, and who wasn't going to bother you with, like, thinking about stuff or for themselves or anything. They were just going to be something that was easy to manipulate and do with, you know, as you wanted to. And then you could dispose of them and get a new one when you're tired of them. So that's it sounds horrifying, but like, when you think through it, it's like the patriarchy lives on in how we see people being beautiful. So, hooray. I'm gay, so it's like almost the exact same thing happens, except without the addition of reproduction. Mm-hmm. So anyway, to take a turn towards something a little bit more pleasant, there are general characteristics that humans find attractive and almost universally. They have done cross-cultural research and have people rate faces by attractiveness, and there's a set of features that are actually quite, that almost everyone likes, that seem to be biologically programmed into us. Those are clear skin. That's probably a reflection of two things. It's a reflection of hormonal balance and contagious disease. If someone's got, like, like spots everywhere, you don't really know whether they've got some sort of infection or whether their hormones just aren't working properly, at least until recently. Nowadays, it's almost always hormonal. Symmetrical facial features. People whose faces are perfectly symmetrical tend to look a little bit odd. Like if you take one person's face and kind of on a photograph and then cut it in half and then flip it around so you've got a mirror reflection, it does look a little weird. But people whose faces are actually very close together in terms of proportion, but a little bit off, they tend to actually be very attractive. So, and youthful features, that's probably reproductive. So people do tend to be, we do have biological drives to reproduce. So people who do have younger looking features, like big eyes, higher cheekbones, and just thinness in general, do tend to have, be fairly, seen as fairly attractive. So those things are all, that's kind of it, and that's not so bad. Most of these things are actually most of these things are actually physical correlates to health. People who are healthy tend to have these in a higher proportion to people who are unhealthy. Tend to. There's like many variations in healthy and so forth. There's one friend of mine who's I knew him back in the day, and he was raised, his parents were naturopaths, and he was raised that way, and his parents are like good-looking people, but not incredible, and then they raised him that way, and he was very healthy and had very great health care all his life, and god damn, he's gorgeous. I was just straight, unfortunately, but it's just like, oh my god. Oh my god. So most of this kind of biological response to beauty is a way to just evaluate the health of potential partners. If we find people attractive based on their biological health, then they're better partners for reproduction. We're potentially going to have healthier children and all that kind of thing in the most Darwinian sense. So they're also kind of reflexive measures of how healthy people were as children. A lot of the health factors that determine how attractive you are do tend to get set at a very early age. So people who tend to have really good nutrition and very good medical care and very good no infectious diseases when they're younger, they tend to hold those features through and be very beautiful and attractive throughout their life. If people are very ill throughout their childhood, they tend to have a different set of features, which does tend to alter your appearance throughout life. So those kind of biological attractiveness features do seem to be proxy for evaluating how healthy someone is now and how healthy they were as a child. So the big thing when determining that is, and if we know that kind of a lot of these attractiveness standards, at least the non-patriarchal ones, are based on health, that gives us a pretty good incentive, doesn't it? If we make ourselves healthy, that kind of attractiveness is a big payoff for that. I've spent so many years figuring out what determines health, and I haven't come up with a 100% list yet. But because I don't think anyone has. What makes us healthy? Lots of things. What makes us unhealthy? Even more things. So, but there's three big factors that I really, really emphasize in my practice, and which I think are very critical. Diet, environmental stress, or environment, like toxic exposure in the environment we're living in, and stress. And one of the best proxy things, aside from just general attractiveness that we have for this, is actually dental health. So we'll get into all of these in a moment. Are there any questions before I continue on?
You mean traditional versus modern diet?
Yeah. We'll get into that. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. So this is some work by the Weston Price Foundation. So Weston Price was a dentist, oddly enough, who traveled the world in the earlier part of the 20th century, and he would look at indigenous peoples, and he would look at the ones eating their traditional diets, which were actually quite varied. Some were agriculturalists, some were pastoralists, so they herded cows about and drank like blood and milk and so forth. Some were fisher people, and he would compare them, those eating those traditional diets that they'd eaten for ages, to other people who were eating the modern diet. So the modern diet at the time was white flour and sugar. Actually, it still pretty much is just that. So he would do that. And he would actually, because he was a dentist, he really emphasized growth and teeth. So these people here on the left, I hope you can see them. Look at their teeth. These are not people with access to dentists. These are not people with access to orthodontists. These are people who probably often don't brush their teeth. Their diets were such that their teeth were perfect. Most people who Western Price found very healthy and very long-lived, like, you know, indigenous peoples never really did well in terms of contact with Western civilization. Like, they would often, after first contact, there would often be a wave of mortality due to infectious disease and so forth. But pre-contact, many of these people lived until their 80s, 90s, and 100s. So they did better than many of us do nowadays in the West. And they didn't have kind of things like they didn't have dental problems or anything. People would get, on average, based on skeletal research, 1 cavity a lifetime. So, and they were exceedingly healthy. Like, childbirth actually proceeded with very few complications. We're kind of, the Western attitude towards how dangerous childbirth was kind of got set during the Victorian era, when mortality among women was about 10% of mortality was due to childbirth. That's not a natural human thing. That was because the Victorians were horribly malnourished. Childbirth mortality among these indigenous people that were quite healthy was extraordinarily low. Infectious disease, aside from what was carried by Europeans, extraordinarily low. People were very healthy, and they had very few long-term chronic health problems. And that was visible to that. So how many people here have their wisdom teeth out? At least one. Every last one of these people had their wisdom teeth come in perfectly. There's kind of a mythology among modern dentists that the human race is evolving, and our jaw is getting smaller, and so there's just not enough room for wisdom teeth. It's completely untrue. When people are adequately nourished throughout their lives, their parents have been and their grandparents have been, their wisdom teeth come in without a single problem. Physically, we as a species, because we're not getting well nourished, are degenerating, and one of the first things is to show with that is, both chronic disease and teeth don't come in properly. So the fact that we need so many orthodontists and we need so many like teeth extractions and so forth is not a sign of how advanced we are or how we're evolving. It's a sign that we are physically degenerating because of what we're eating and doing. So there's this kind of mythology in a lot of conventional medicine that life in these societies was primitive and short, and people suffered, and they must have had the same dental problems that we did and everything else, and they just had horrible lives, and all this science and technology has lifted us up and made us better. No. Hunter-gatherers were the healthiest people, and they had the best lifestyle. They had to gather, and in most cultures on average, they had to gather food for about 3 or 4 hours a day. What'd they do the rest of the time? They sat around and chatted with their friends. They played with their children. They sang songs and played games and did storytelling marathons and thought about life and things of that nature. Like, they had the best quality of life that anyone has had since. The question of why these people would change that for life where they were farming, which comparably in terms of health outcomes and lifestyle really sucked, is a very interesting one in cultural anthropology, and it's one to which we don't really have a good answer yet. So that's my little thing on that. So, and that is actually quite anthropologically well established. We can go and look at a number of groups of people throughout the world, like pre and post contact with Europeans, and see how their lifestyle and their health fared, and it was always quite high, like higher than the Europeans, and then once the diet and once everything else came in. These people are people who are subsisting, they're either indigenous or sometimes not, and they're having, and this is after introduction of foods. So most of these people were from an island in Ireland where they were fishermen and fisherwomen, and they ate mostly fish and lobster and a little bit of oats and seaweeds and things like that. So they had teeth very similar to this, But then they made more contact with the mainland and started importing like sugar and flour and things. And this is what happened after, I think, one generation. So you can see this kid, he's got like all these gaps in his teeth. This child over here has like this big gap, and there's some teeth that are coming in funny. This woman's missing teeth, and this person's missing teeth as well, and that's a child. So, yeah. Dental health is probably one of the best things. And in the Western world, like, we cheat. We have, like, our teeth look great, but because they're not real. Most of our teeth are fake. Most of us have, like, teeth that have been artificially straightened out, or teeth that have been improved through the addition of prostheses and things like fillings and so forth, and the removal of others. So we may look like we have great teeth, but we really don't. Same thing. So same thing. If anyone's interested in learning more, like, in detail about this, there's a really good book, and it's not that expensive. It's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price. So, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price. There is a little bit of colonialism in the influence, remarkably so. In most colonial circles of the time, it was just assumed that colonized peoples were just somehow inferior. And Weston Price didn't buy that. He thought that their culture was actually quite lovely, and that the reason why they were having so many problems is the addition of this stuff into the diet, and so forth. So it's quite a good outlook on the time. There's still some colonial influences in the book, but like, you can't replicate this research anymore. And you don't even need to like look at the statistics. Like, just look at the picture. A friend of mine said once that statistics are only necessary if you haven't done a good enough experiment, and in a certain extent, this is true. Like, look at that. Same thing. These people on the left, healthy traditional diets. They're just, so you can see, and you can see in terms of their facial structure and everything else too, there's quite a lot more proportion, and they just look happier. Like, on the right, these people have been introduced to the Western diet, and yeah, in addition to being unhappy probably because they're in pain from all this dental stuff, there's a little bit of a degeneration in terms of physical structure of the face as well. And that physical structure is actually kind of like, the right side is probably what we would consider more attractive. It's better proportioned, it's more symmetrical. The left, less attractive. There's starting to be more growth abnormalities and more like, and the jaw structure is not, and the jaw and skull structure is not on setting as well. So that's interesting. So, based on those two kind of bits, and Weston Price took, I think he did about 15 studies of particular cultures. So, and it wasn't a particular diet. He found some like agriculturalists who had that really good facial structure and excellent teeth. He found some people who ate milk, some people who ate nothing but meat and blood and milk, some people who ate fish. One thing he didn't find any vegetarian cultures that had that good facial structure. He found, and this anthropologically is true as well. You know how many vegan cultures there are on the planet? Zero. And vegetarian cultures did tend to have more facial structure issues than cultures that at least ate some animal products, whether it was milk, or whether it was eggs, or whether it was fish. Yes?
I have a question about glutes, and
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the whole gluten thing.
Yeah.
When you talk about hunter-gatherers,
Yeah.
are you talking about farmers?
No.
So hunter-gatherers went and gathered berries and whatever.
Gathered berries and ate meat.
And ate meat. So, as I understand, I mean, Alberta is very agricultural.
Yeah.
And we've had grain and farmers for as long as we've been here.
Yeah.
So, what is your opinion about that kind of diet? Is wheat unhealthy, and oats and barley and...
There were people among those groups of people who did eat wheat and barley and so forth. That was in the 20s. In the last, since World War II again, we've kind of experimented with wheat. There are different varieties grown nowadays that have a higher protein content, and we harvest them differently. Previously, you'd kind of chop down the wheat, and then you'd let it sit in the fields for a few days, and it would kind of sprout, and that would actually minimize the gluten content. And you'd actually ferment the bread, and fermenting bread and making something like sourdough kind of breaks the gluten down so that it's more digestible. Gluten is something that people just aren't really good at digesting, like period, like nobody's really good at it. whether you've got celiac or sensitivity or not. Interestingly, and in addition to that, there's been an addition of a large number of pesticides. So interestingly, I've had a couple patients, and I think I run a Facebook group for naturopathic doctors that has about 1,700 members now, which is very odd. I thought it would be just like 100 of me and my friends, and then 2 years later, it's the biggest. It's like the biggest Facebook group for naturopathic doctors and the second biggest online group for MDs, period, and I'm running it. It's insane. But we had this discussion about people who can't eat wheat in North America, but they go to Europe and they can eat it fine. That actually does happen. That suggests one of two things. It suggests either pesticide residues, or it suggests that there are different varieties of wheat, or perhaps both at the same time. So I'm not against, so I on my YouTube thing, I did a presentation on wheat. I'm probably a little less anti-wheat than I was back 2 years ago, but at the same time, most people do a lot better in North America if they minimize wheat in their diet. Most people in Europe, it doesn't make a difference. Or most people outside of North America, it doesn't actually make a difference. So that suggests that there may be an issue with that. Most people, when they get their health stabilized, are fine with things like sourdough bread. Most people, like proper celiac disease is not, but things like sourdough bread and so forth. So I'm not anti-wheat. Whatever the hell they're doing to the wheat that makes people so sensitive to it in North America, I'm against that.
What about barley and oats?
People tend to react less to those things. So like barley bread or oats and things like that. Some people do. Like no matter how much I cut it out of my diet, like I can have a little bit, but I'm sensitive to oats. Like I was living off of oatmeal for a little while. I just had a lot of it, and so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have oatmeal for breakfast every day. And I did that for about a month, and before I realized I was sensitive to it, and I would just get these like horrendous 5-day flus and be like deliriously sick and throwing up and everything, and I was like, what is going wrong with me? Am I dying? And I can't treat myself. Like I'm really bad at, I just can't do it. My mind doesn't work that way for me. So I would just call up my friend, one of my friends, I'm like, I'm dying, you need to come fix me, I'm dying, and soon I'm going to be dead. And that was what we figured out, and then I stopped doing that, and gone. And so some people have sensitivities to those specifically. Strangely enough, I can do wheat now. I used to not be able to do it, but now I can. So I don't have a problem with wheat, but I do have a problem with oats. So it varies from person to person, but most barley and oats and rye and things people can do better with, if that makes any sense. So I'm not against the grains and everything. Most of those healthy people in Western Price's work, grains might have been a significant part of the diet, but there always was an animal protein part, like either milk or fermented milk usually, or eggs or fish in particular. The actual people who had tons of fish in their diet were the healthiest of all. So. Which is pretty interesting. I'm in favor of the aquatic ape hypothesis of human evolution. So there's kind of two big ideas of human evolution. There is the hunter one, which is really interesting. It was kind of what advanced in the era immediately after Darwin. And again, it's kind of a patriarchal thing. It's like, man, the hunter. We stood up so you could throw things at animals and kill them and so forth, and living on the savannah. And there's a second one that was actually advanced that makes a bit more sense. But it was advanced as a feminist hypothesis. One of the original books that was written on it was called The Descent of Woman, and it was in the 60s, and so it was not as well received. But it actually makes a lot more sense. The idea was that humans evolved as aquatic apes, and we became bipedal because you can get deeper in the water without swimming with that, and that we lost our hair because a lot of hair can impact swimming. And it's an interesting thing, like, ape hair tends to point downwards like a sleeve. Human hair points backwards, universally. So what happens with that is, human hair, it catches the water, so you have a bit more drag when you're swimming forward. Does not obstruct when you're kind of moving your arms forward. So in addition to that, there's nutritional hypotheses as well. Humans do quite well on red meat. The idea that red meat is harmful is not really correct, with the exception of processed meats like hot dogs and salamis and things like that. But humans do okay on that. Humans do excellently on fish. Like, we are just so good at eating fish and shellfish and clams and lobsters and things like that. Like, there's that's the best of all. So that suggests to me that that's kind of how we evolved, is that we were kind of apes that were in the process of becoming fully aquatic, and we just kind of aborted that and returned to land eventually. Yeah, I know. So fish tends to be the big thing. Grains do tend to be in healthy diets, but they tend to be fermented, and they tend to be in not too high amounts, and lots of vegetables and fruits and things like that. Okay? And you had a question.
Are you going to talk about what we can do if we have missed that young age and proper dieting? Because like in my case, from age 2 to 15, I was raised on candies and potato chips.
Yeah.
Because that's what I liked, and I was given what I liked.
Yeah. And that's one of the best things is, you know, all of you with children, you know better than your children, and you are more stubborn than your children. If you that's one of the things is like, no one's health is going to be impacted by having a birthday cake once in a while, or having like some candies on a special occasion, or having like a dessert, you know, once a week. But, you know, the key thing that I tell most of the parents in my practice is you need to eliminate the unhealthy foods from the house for everybody, including yourself. And if there's nothing but unhealthy foods, you can starve them into eating healthy. Sounds horrible, but that actually works really well. Yeah, starve your kids into eating healthy. If there's nothing but like vegetables or like high protein snacks and everything, and there's no sugary crap, they'll eat it eventually. Yes?
I'm a grandma, and I couldn't possibly say no to ice cream.
Grandmas are different. If you're taking care of your grandparents, if you're taking care of your kids occasionally, and you know your grandma and you're making cookies or ice cream,
Yeah,
like don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
If you're their primary caregiver and you're doing it daily, I'd have to have a bit of a talk. I'd have to have a bit of a chat with you about that. So, and that's kind of the thing. It's like sometimes you need to be a parent, and you need to like, I know better than you. This is what we're doing, and I know you're unhappy about it, but I don't care.
Is there a point where it's too late to start with your kids if they're already in their teen years?
No.
And
No,
it's just a matter of changing that.
It's not too late. You're not going to get the full benefit, but you're still going to get improvement. Like if they're still growing and developing, it's still going to be better. So, and it's not even that difficult. So, proper diet. One of the best things you can add to people's diets, and you can even sneak it in, is bone broth. You take bones of like animals like chickens or cows or something like that. You put them in a slow cooker with a tablespoon or like half a lemon or a couple of tablespoons of vinegar. It soaks out the minerals. The minerals get complexed with fats and amino acids, and then you can put it in rice or soup or whatever ways you can figure out to sneak it in, and that is like incredibly nourishing. Like that undoes a lot of the damage that happens. So. In terms of people who were raised unhealthy, you can maintain what you've got, but those facial structure abnormalities, often without intervention, often can be, you know, they're a bit more difficult to treat. So good immune system exercise, so diet is a big thing. Immune system exercise is another thing. In our culture, we don't really permit children to be sick in terms of anything. And this is one thing I disagree with conventional medicine quite a bit on, is that conventional medicine has this idea that as soon as a fever develops, you need to suppress it. And that kind of arises out of the ideology that conventional medicine derives from. So there are two basic ideas in medicine. We kind of think of holistic medicine as a new thing, and conventional medicine is kind of the way things have always been. That's completely not true. Those two schools of thought were almost completely formed. There have been advances in each since this period, but the two basic sets of ideas were formed perfectly, and we can see them clearly expressed in the Hippocratic Corpus, which is probably written between 5,000 and 1,000 before the Common Era. So those two schools of thought were perfectly well put out, or perfectly set forth, and both of which have advanced since then. They've had new ideas and things happen, but the basics of the two systems of medicine in the West were present since then. And the big thing with conventional medicine is that it sees the body as a machine. If you've got like a car and it starts making a noise, the noise isn't trying to accomplish something. The noise is a sign that something is wrong and you need to fix it. And you need to make sure that noise doesn't happen anymore. That's the same way that they view everything that goes wrong with the body. It's a sign that the machine is malfunctioning. It's not serving a purpose in and of itself. You need to suppress it right away. And that goes into fever all the time. Fever is your immune system trying to fight things off. And the way I like to put this to, again, my pediatrics mothers, or the mothers of my children patients, is that the immune system doesn't arrive via facts from the uterus. You don't emerge into the world with a perfectly healthy immune system. You need to practice on things. You need to have coughs and colds and flus and things like that, and even some mild diseases. Like, you know, there are a number of diseases that we've kind of eradicated, like chickenpox being the key one. It's a terrible disease if you get it when you're older, but as a child, it's really excellent practice to kind of get your immune system to the point where it can deal with viruses and so forth. So, yeah, even just common coughs and colds and bacterial infections and things, kids need to be able to fight those off, and they need to have practice doing that without having their fevers and their immune systems immediately suppressed. Does that make sense? All right. Third is a safe environment for developing. This is one of the hardest things, just because it was interesting. There's a man named Pottinger who, in the last century, he fed one cat like a cat diet, so like meat and milk and things like that. And he fed another group of cats like a diet that's very close to what we eat, so white flour and sugar and margarine and things. And then he compared their development. So the first generation, there wasn't really any change in behavior or physical expression. Second generation, the unhealthily fed cats, their teeth started coming in a little funny, and they started not liking each other. And I know it's cats, but like more than normal. And then the third generation, the cats couldn't reproduce. Their teeth were coming in at like every single angle, and they hated each other. They would like attack each other. This is kind of an interesting thing. As nutritionally we degenerate, something happens in our brain that makes us more antisocial, and I suspect that may be contributing to kind of how relationships and a lot of things aren't working as well nowadays. So when children don't have a safe relationship, when they don't have like, you know, this is where I live, and it's not necessarily like, you know, a nuclear family like many people insist, it's just, this is where I live, this is my family, this is completely safe for me, and these are all these people who love me and are going to take care of me no matter what. There are biochemical changes that happen, and there are emotional changes that happen, but those cause biochemical changes, and those can impact just how our chemistry develops and everything else like that. So social stability is really important, particularly in, you know, not every marriage works. Like, I'm not a fan of like staying together for the sake of children, but like children need that emotional stability. They need to know that both their parents are there for them, and they need to know that, you know, at least have a little bit of faith in their parents. One thing that I'm particularly against is people using children as cannonballs against each other. Like, you know, one parent tries to turn the kid against the other. My parents got separated in 1995, and they actually didn't do that. And I was really, like, they were really mad at each other, but they didn't do that, and that did very well for me and my brother and sister. And so that's kind of one thing that I'm quite against, is like people deliberately creating that, or maybe not deliberately, but creating that either through their own kind of emotional deficiencies, or sometimes deliberately creating that not safe environment for children. And it's a similar thing with people who are having children and just can't take care of them. Like, children need a safe environment. So that's kind of one of the big things. And even nowadays, like, getting yourself into a place where there is love and security in your life is really, really important. Financial security is really huge. I am a big fan of the idea that, you know, society should be run for the benefit of everybody, and not necessarily for, as in the United States and many other places, for the benefit of people who already have power. Everyone needs a good place to live, and security, and the ability to relax and not like struggle for their daily lives. Some of that is obviously self-imposed. Like, if you've got a credit card problem and the companies are chasing you down, you know, you need help with that, but that's not something society should be taking care of in that necessary sense. But in the sense of the modern political context, where a lot of jobs are being outsourced and various things are being done to undermine, you know, what everyone's kind of collective financial security, like, we all need to kind of deal with that. Like, that's not okay. And that is not conducive to human health. Assuming we've got all of those things happening, how do we restore health? Many of the features of, like, the particularly skeletal features and facial features of health can't be restored in an adult. You can get a little bit of improvement, but you can't, like, you know, my really attractive friend, I'm not going to have the same facial features as him. So, but you can do a lot of change. You can do considerable changes. And by doing these changes, your kids will get the benefit if you're still reproducing. So if you, like, maybe have some problems with your facial structure, but you feed yourselves well before pregnancy, and you feed your children well, they will improve. Did any of you come to my genetics presentation I just did a little while ago? So there's this thing called epigenetics. So your particular lifestyle will modify how your genes express, and these changes are heritable. So your children will get your epigenetic changes. So it takes about 3 generations to go either up or down completely, or 3 or 4. So if you do a really good job, like your children will be much better, and their grandchildren, if they maintain that, will be quite a bit improved. So yes?
Is there a way to change your gene expression?
Yes. You can change your gene expression by changing your lifestyle, by changing the environment you're in.
So it's nutrition?
Nutrition, diet, good medical treatment, dealing with whatever chronic diseases you have, and a few other things. So that's absolutely possible. I suspect, don't have any data to back this up, but I suspect that changing your genetic expression like that actually changes your gene code eventually. I don't have data to do that, but I think it changes your gene code. It will make you age not as well, and some people can take quite a bit off. So if the reason, not you in particular, but you, rhetorical, are looking older is because you're really toxic and your environment is terrible and you're smoking and drinking and relying on coffee to get you through the day and you're looking like you're 40 even though you're 28, yeah, you could reverse that quite easily. If you're a really healthy 70-year-old who looks like they're 50, you may not get too much progress going backwards, but you can maintain what you've got for longer. Does that make sense? So, and of course, so we can change skin tone quite a bit, in addition to like just overall health. It expresses skin tone, your overall vitality, happiness. People who are happy are really beautiful. Like there's this kind of radiance that they have, at least I perceive it, you know, and so forth. So if you can like maintain yourself into a happy position, like I'm happy with my life, and my life is fulfilling and joyous, and you know, I may have had bad things happen to me, but I'm moving forward and I'm doing it, and it's gonna be okay. I mean, I made a Facebook post the other day, and it was like, you either trust the universe or you don't. And it's very true. You either trust that things are going to work out, or you see the world as a hostile, scary, terrifying place. And there's not really much middle ground between the two. So when you kind of get into that place where you're trusting what's going on, and that trust in the universe is not, I term the universe because that's the cultural term that I was raised with. It may be God, it may be, you know, the laws of physics, or it may be, you know, any particular variation of those things. The actual trust in blank is not really that important. But if you've got that basic faith that you'll be able to deal with things and that it's going to work out, that's really awesome. And that's a state of your biochemistry and a state of your development as a human being and a state of your health that's reflective of all those things. So you can get yourself to that place. And even if you're pissed off or something, or you're upset, like I was taking care of my mother's dogs, and yesterday, you know, I trust in the universe and all that, and I'm, you know, maybe not perfectly, but I'm getting there. And I trust in the universe and everything, but I was mad at my dog when he kind of ate an entire bag of apples and then shredded the plastic bag and then pooped on the couch. And I love my mom's dog, but he's a bad little dog. So, you know, you can still get mad or sad at things, but that basic kind of like, I'm going to be okay, this is going to be fine, this is going to work out, is present. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. So this is kind of how I do this with patients. Nutrition and diet. We've been talking a lot about that, so we won't go into this in any great detail. I've got YouTube videos on it and everything else, so if you want to, just remember Paul Terrio, Naturopathic on YouTube. And you know, you can just Google Paul Terrio and it'll probably come up eventually if you scroll down enough, and you'll see that hilarious sportscaster guy. He's awesome. Second word is detoxification, which we're going to talk about. And the third way that I do this is actually acupuncture, and particularly cosmetic acupuncture. So, do you ever get a chance to enter into the little jar-a-majig? All right. So just do that because that's a draw for a free session.
What is cosmetic acupuncture?
We're going to talk about that. Yeah. So, nutrition is probably the most complex subject in medicine today. James McCormick, who kind of taught most naturopathic doctors in Canada pharmacy, maintains that nutrition is actually harder to study than pharmacy because we can't study it in the same way. It's not like you can really completely control humans and control what they eat and then observe the results, because like obviously you'd be doing like very inhumane medical experiments on them. So we've got proxy, so normally we just kind of rely on people's memory, we rely on other things, and we kind of rely on more indirect measures for nutrition. So it's actually quite difficult. That's why I favor work like Weston Price, because you can see how nutrition is played out over generations. And so we're not really, like it's an observational study, it's got less power than, you know, a randomized, like a completely randomized controlled trial, but you can't really do those in nutrition. So it's a very difficult thing to study, but we do have a basis of knowledge in it. Basically everything we do in North America is wrong. That's the sum of nutritional science nowadays. Almost everything we do is wrong. Digestion relies primarily, or nutrition relies on digestion, how well you're breaking in addition to, so it relies on, you know, obviously what you're eating, how well you're breaking down your food, the actual like mechanical and chemical breakdown of what's happening. The flora you have in your digestive tract, which either make happy chemicals for you or nasty chemicals for you. They can either support your body's immune system or bring it down or occasionally attack it. And movement, literally how well things move through your digestive tract. It's a really big thing. Things are moving too quickly, you're not absorbing anything. If things are moving too slowly, it's stagnating and all those nasty chemicals from bacteria are developing. So I'm going to leave it at that because that's like a 3 or 4 hour presentation in and of itself. But all of those things are very important. For digestion, all of them are very easily remedied. Like digestion is something I'm super good at, and most naturopathic doctors are just like, oh, you've got irritable bowel syndrome, you've got Crohn's, you've got ulcerative colitis, you've got, you know, stomach aches or reflux. Like, don't worry about it, it's done. It's not hard. So those, and it's quite interesting because that's one of the great strengths of our medicine. Conventional medicine is not, they're not horrible with this, but they're not great with it. Most medical systems really do have their strengths. The strength of allopathic medicine is in surgery and in trauma. They're very good at those things. Like literally, particularly like, you know, I've gotten shot, you know, or I remember that Simpsons episode where they had Snake and he was like, oh yeah, I accidentally fell on top of my knife. Can't even do his accent right, but so things like that they're very good with. Other things like long-term problems and things like digestion, naturopathic medicine and other medical systems are actually much better, at least in my opinion. For not for every aspect of it, but for most things. Like, you know, if you've got a bowel intussusception or you've got like a ruptured something or other, you probably need surgery, and that's not something I'm going to do. But most day-to-day things we can do quite well. So the next thing is detoxification. We're going to spend a reasonable amount of time here because this is really kind of a big thing nowadays. It's one of the major physiological stressors contributing. Oh, I didn't reread this. So it's one of the major physiological stressors contributing to premature aging. Detoxification consists of two things: elimination of what you're being exposed to now, and helping your body remove what you've been exposed to in the past and you haven't completely gotten rid of yet. It's pretty simple. Past and present. Oops. There's many sources of toxicity in the modern world. You all work in the oil industry. Fort McMurray is like a toxic waste dump. Not even a toxic waste dump, it's just like the air radiates all those horrible hydrocarbons and everything. There's a few MDs there and they do booming business in terms of detoxification. Not necessarily just to get people hugely better, but to just keep people where they are. So oil rig workers and everyone else are just so toxic. But there's others as well. There's many sources of toxicity in our diet, particularly in additives. There's pollution. We're actually quite fortunate in Canada, in Calgary in particular. Canada and Calgary are very clean cities, so that's not as huge of a thing. Household chemicals, and the biggest one that people are exposed to is beauty products, which is really, really ironic. Imagine that something you're taking to make you more beautiful is making you age faster. Wah ha 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 ha. Seriously, it's almost Shakespearean. So, beauty products are not regulated quite as heavily as other things like foods and supplements are. How do you know what's in your beauty product? They might tell you voluntarily, but they're often not legally required to. And Health Canada Health Canada does maintain a watch on them, but only for like this perfume made someone die kind of things. More subtle sources of toxicity or anything else, we don't really monitor for them because they're not considered something we take in as much. So beauty products contain many carcinogens, heavy metals, biological mimics, so substances that mimic biological molecules that can interfere with those processes, and hormone mimics as well. Just gonna pause this for a second. Politically correct again. So anyway, there's a couple of, hormone mimics are a big thing. Other things, coal tar is actually very common. Coal tar and coal tar derivatives are found a lot in pharmaceuticals and cosmetics. So the interesting thing about this was in sort of pre-World War I Germany, there was a very big dye industry, and they were overproducing dye, so they started figuring out what they could use it for besides dyeing fabric, and they came up with pharmaceuticals and beauty products. And that's where we started doing that. So things like coal tar and various other things. And they're also used in histology a lot. Hormones, heavy metals, mercury in particular, formaldehyde, phthalates. Do you guys remember how there's the big controversy about banning phthalates and other products in like baby dolls and stuff? Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I think I'm so in favor of that. Sodium lauryl sulfate, which is a foaming agent in shampoo. Polyethylene glycol, which is it's antifreeze. And you know where I find this actually very frequently? Toothpaste. Yeah. And toluene, which is another, and toluene I should have put I should have put aromatic polycyclic hydrocarbons as well. So basically just very toxic oil derivatives. Quite frequently antibiotics as well. Yeah. So,
Dr. Paul,
yes.
why do they add, is some of this to preserve products?
Yes.
And some just the color?
Mm-hmm. Each of these things has industrial applications. I know I'm not disputing that those things may make a nice color, they may make a nice metallic sheen, they may make the toothpaste, more appropriately runny and so forth, not like liquidy and not too thick. Or they may make the shampoo foamy. I just don't think those things are compatible with human health. So, yeah. The effects of these things. Premature aging. Ha 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 ha. It's funny, something you're taking to make you look younger makes you age faster. It's like, yesterday I saw the video of, so on Parliament Hill, they were playing like the song from Star Wars, like dun 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 dun. And Parliament Hill, the bells were playing that. I'm like, do you realize the irony of a government institution playing that? Come on. This is it's so ironic that you almost can't believe it. It's like things that make you younger. And it's brilliant in a business sense. Things that you do to make you look younger, make you age faster, so you need to buy more of them. So, yeah, they contribute greatly to hormone disruption. There's not great evidence, but you're putting 100 carcinogens on yourself every day in terms of beauty products, something's going to happen. There is some suspicion that carcinogenesis may be accelerated by this. Neurological effects, and many more subtle ones. People who don't use these kind of products, just in my own experience and the experience of other naturopathic doctors and other professions that do similar things like overseas that I know, people who don't use these products actually tend to respond better to naturopathic medicine. People who are like soaked in toxic chemicals you'll give them a homeopathic or you'll give them some hydrotherapy and they'll get a little bit better, but the response is kind of less than you expect versus people who are who live away from that. And there's other lifestyle and diet things involved, but they'll get like a cough and you'll give them a very basic general cough remedy and it's like, oh, I'm better in 20 minutes. Like the difference is quite extreme sometimes. It leads me to suspect that they're impairing the body's self-regulatory mechanisms and healing mechanisms. Yes?
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but sometimes I get tempted in those anti-wrinkle creams, which I've never used.
Yeah.
But what do you think of those?
There's some that are good.
Okay.
There are many that are not good. If they won't tell you what's in them, don't buy them. Ever. Like, what's in this stuff? Give me an ingredients list. Well, we can't release that. It's proprietary. No, not happening. Yeah, so if they'll tell you exactly what's in it, and it's good stuff, it may be good or it may be not good. So I do have a couple of brands that I'm going to talk about in a little while. So so for any of you who are wondering about your particular beauty products, how toxic or not toxic they are, there's a really good, and it's an American group, so they may not have every Canadian brand. If you just Google Skin Deep Group by the Environmental Working Group. And this is the website. And they have a list of 35,000 beauty products with their relative toxic loads. It is a very good list. Yeah, it's a very good service. So if you're like using any particular brand, which I'm not going to mention on tape, that you're wondering about how toxic they are, what's in it, that's one resource too. Do you all have that down? If anyone wants to email me, you can just email me and I will send you this presentation. So, solutions. So there are some products that we're exposed to more than others. Things that go in the mouth tend to be the most dramatic. Toothpaste. I go to Superstore, there's non-toxic toothpaste that they have now. A lot of the common ones have like other things in them, but there's ones you can buy in the natural products section that aren't even that expensive, that have far fewer and sometimes even occasionally no toxic products in them. So that's super cool. Personal products like shampoos, deodorants, things like that. I mean, most deodorants have a ton of aluminum in them, or aluminum tetrahydrochloride, various like carbon compounds that our body just can't metabolize. Moving away from those and moving towards better ones, even if it's often a tendency towards reducing exposure versus not. So maybe instead of 15 harmful chemicals, there's a brand that has 1. That's still an improvement. So cosmetics is a big one, and shampoo is kind of lower on the list because we're not like exposed to shampoo at all times. But shampoo's pretty easy too. Like there are a number of brands of shampoo. You can go to a health food store, or again, even like bigger brands are having these natural and organic sections. Again, I would urge caution about greenwashing. There are a number of companies that are marketing towards people who are more health conscious and people who are more in the organics market who aren't actually doing anything differently. They've just got a pretty green label and maybe they recycle. So you need to still read the ingredients, okay? Oh, there we go. I did that. Here are 3 sources for cosmetics. I don't wear a lot of cosmetics. I know I'm gay, but I don't do that, so alas, I'm a terrible gay man. But these are 3 potential sources. So Jane Iredale's a brand. They're actually they do very well in terms of that. White Apothecary and the Detox Market, which carries several brands. All 3 of which are potentially very good sources for cleaner cosmetics. So those are all very good things. So I'll give you guys a minute to write that down.
Are micas safe? Like when you're trying to get coloring products, it's like...
That's a challenging one. So I'm not as familiar with coloring products.
What about oxides? Same kind of thing.
So, like most coloring products are actually quite damaging and alkaline. If you're doing something where they're not actually in contact with your body for that long, that's usually okay. If you're able to just leave your roots untouched for a little bit, that's usually fine. If it's very temporary, that's also quite lovely. If it's just like you're getting it once every couple of months or something like that, it's fine. But again, on these lists, with coloring products, you're not going to get non-toxic, but you're going to get much less toxic. So if you're able to eliminate most of the toxicity, that's still like doing better.
Jane Iredale, she's kind of mineral-based, so minerals are sort of a safe avenue.
Better. Yeah. Minerals are kind of a little bit less toxic than, mercury and aluminum. Like mercury and aluminum are minerals, but they're using ones that, so far we haven't seen to be as harmful. So, all right, you guys all have this down? Okay, good. By removing even just a little bit, you can reduce your toxic exposure, and you can reduce your the potential consequences of that toxic exposure down the road. So if like toxicity is like this, if your toxic load is like kind of gradually increasing over time, but you can kind of make it flatline or even just increase very slowly versus you're using toxic stuff and it goes up like that. So there's no way any of us can be completely non-toxic in this world. It's just not going to happen. But we can keep toxicity below the level where we can deal with it, and we can minimize it. We can stop using our dollars to, buy up products from these companies that are producing all these toxic chemicals, and that will kind of gradually stop these kinds of things. So, do we have any questions on toxicity? I didn't address the, oh, yes, sorry.
What about cumulative effects
Yeah.
of toxicity? Can you rid your body of what's in there, or
Yes.
are there some things that are cumulative that don't go?
There are, you can get rid of almost anything.
Oh.
So, heavy metals can be gotten rid of, toxic petrochemicals can be gotten rid of. Your body is always clearing things, so it's just a question of both sometimes giving your body a bit of a kick to get rid of them faster and reducing exposure. If you get your current exposure down below what your body can deal with, so your body's able to deal with more than what you're taking in, your body burden will start decreasing. There's also a number of products where you can processes where you can increase your body's ability to deal with things. Detoxification it's not something you should really, very healthy people can do it at a health food store. Everyone else needs supervision because it's actually pretty difficult. So some methods will work and some won't. Very healthy people can just go to a sauna occasionally and they'll sweat it out. Unhealthy people won't be able to do that and they'll actually get worse. And so unhealthy people need more guided things. They might need a homeopathic, or they might need a little bit of herbal drainage therapy to kind of open up their body's ability to deal with the toxins. But yes, 100%, if you've already been exposed, there's a way out of that. All right? Okay, so you were next. So.
My question was
Yeah.
kind of around that, the detoxes. Everybody's all about detoxing. Can't you just start eating healthy?
Yes, you can start eating healthy, and that's an excellent start. So classical detoxes were designed for people who were healthy European peasants 200 years ago. That's kind of where the basic theory came from, and a lot of times it hasn't really advanced since then. You're not going to get, you might get a little less toxic, but if you're a really unhealthy person, you're not going to get less toxic by doing a 2 week, by eating brown rice for 2 weeks and taking a bunch of tablets. So it sounds horribly mean of me to say that, but a lot of the detox products out there just aren't going to benefit you. And if you are actually extremely toxic, and the problem with toxic people is eventually their body just stops being able to detoxify, those products can stir up toxicity and actually make you worse. So how to detoxify when you are really toxic often does need professional help. Naturopathic doctors are trained in these kinds of things. We're trained about how to get people from super toxic to healthy with as least pain as possible. And oftentimes it is about doing it for a long time. I detoxify people for months and years at a time. And it's not an intense, you're not eating brown rice for 2 years. We get you on a good diet. That's the excellent starting period. We reduce your exposures, and then I'll have people take up a couple of maybe 5 or 10 drops of an herbal thing per day that kind of gives your body a little bit of a kick in the butt to all right, you're gonna start detoxifying a bit more. I'll get people on a homeopathic that will kick their body into reacting properly. We may eventually start incorporating other modalities like hydrotherapy and things that do, again, reset your body's ability to detoxify. So yeah, no, when I do detoxes, I do them for years on people. And it's not intense stuff. It's you're gonna have a healthy diet for years, and then we're gonna start detoxifying you. Does that make sense? Yes. So eating healthy is step one. And for some people who have a very low toxic burden and are very healthy already, maybe step one's all you need to do. Many people, that's not the case. You.
Oh, that was my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. So, I should have perhaps put in a little thing in here about cosmetic procedures in general. One of the interesting thing, like kind of, what's the big cosmetic procedure everyone's getting nowadays? Botox. You know what Botox, so how many of you know what Botox is? Botox is botulinum. So it's kind of botulinum, it's botulism. And the whole thing with botulism is botulism when you have like botulism from improperly canned food, you get flaccid paralysis, you can't move. It's very closely related to tetanus. Tetanus, you get rigid paralysis. You can't move, but for, you know, because you can't move, versus botulism, like, you can't move. You're literally paralyzing your muscles. So quite often what causes wrinkles are habitual contractions in the facial muscles, and these are normal, every human gets them. But you're paralyzing those muscles. Human facial expression is cognitively linked to our emotional things. There are people, for instance, there's a guy in, he's a psychiatrist or an MD of some sort in California, and he started injecting Botox into the facial muscles of depressed people, into the facial muscles that make you frown, and they got better. Like if they couldn't frown, their bodies couldn't like quite go into that depressed state, and they're like, hey, I'm happier for some reason. Like things like that actually happen. You know, the divorce rate after people get Botox goes up by quite a bit because they can't emotionally process and they can't express as much. So this is actually quite an interesting thing to me. And remember all those photos of those Barbie people I showed you earlier? What was one? Did any of them have a facial expression? Those people are Botox to hell. They probably don't have too many emotions just because of those features. Like if you can't express with your face, you're not going to emotionally process. And I have this theory, eventually you're going to have to deal with your stuff. Eventually you're going to have to deal with your emotions. If you're suppressing emotions in one way or another, it's going to come out. Whether it comes out as a physical disease, or whether it comes out in terms of just an explosion one day, you have to deal with it. So I'm not a big fan of like paralyzing yourself into numbness. So the patriarchal ideal might be a nubile little zombie, but yeah, it's not going to happen forever. So as opposed to other acupuncture, or as opposed to other approaches, acupuncture preserves what we have, my brain is going faster than my tongue is. Nutrition and promotion of health and detoxification tends to preserve what we have and get rid of what's kind of aging us more quicker. Acupuncture does tend to focus on regenerating a little bit. And it's not regenerating in quite the same way that some of the other cosmetic procedures are. Like, there are a lot of cosmetic procedures that aren't harmful. Like, sometimes people can get an acid peel and it's actually quite good for them. It does seem to not have huge amounts of impacts. Other cosmetic procedures are more harmful, and I'm not going to talk about them to the greater extent, with the exception of Botox, which I know a lot about and I don't approve of. So there's different, like some people have spastic paralysis, and so you need to inject Botox into joints so they can move again. That's kind of a different thing. So anyway, acupuncture focuses on regenerating the face. Interestingly, it actually does work in a similar mechanism to Botox, or partially. So Botox does the muscular release as well. So acupuncture, when you prick a muscle with, like I do this with musculoskeletal acupuncture, if a muscle is seized, you prick it in the right place, it will spasm for a little bit and then release. Same mechanism, but if you do that with acupuncture, you can use the muscle afterwards. So it's not as permanent because the muscle, just because of your habitual facial contractions, may resume, so you need to do more sessions, but you can use it afterwards. So you kind of get this return of facial expression, and this can actually, like, your own muscles can freeze and prevent expressions. Quite often people will get emotional releases when you're doing this. They'll like start crying or laughing, or I giggled when I got my facial acupuncture when I was taking my course, I was giggling all the time. Because whenever I get emotional releases, I laugh a lot. Apparently I'm too serious. And the second of which Botox does not do, is destruction, recreation of collagen matrix, which sounds scary, but it is not. Uh-oh. Oh, there's the collagen matrix. So so our cells don't kind of just sit directly next to each other all the time. Our cells have this this kind of protein gel around them that situates them. Some cells, like epithelial cells, kind of touch each other, and then they've got like a basement membrane of protein that they attach to. Most cells, particularly in the skin, have this like gel of a number of proteins that attract water to them, and collagen is a big component of that. So collagen, so that's kind of, this is the best photo I could find. I have a bunch of photos from my, from like, you know, textbooks and things, but they're all copyrighted. So this is the one I found on Wiki Images, so I'm sorry. But you guys get the idea, right? Those little brownie blacky things are cells, or those little gray things are cells, and they're all kind of in this protein matrix. Does that make sense? Good, good, good. As the body ages, this extracellular matrix makes more and more connections among themselves. So the collagen cells kind of interlink more and more. The more they interlink, the less boingy they get. It's a wonderfully technical word, isn't it? Boingy. The less springy and elastic they are. Because it's like, you two stand up. So it's like, so we're gonna, so put down your book. So we're gonna hold hands. So there we go, hold her hand. We're like, woo, look how much we can move. Okay, so now we're gonna link hands together. You hold her hand here. We're gonna hold, here, just cross over a little bit. Okay, more interlinkages, and like, look, we can't move like nearly as much. Does that make sense? You kind of get how more interlinkages do that. Thank you so much. So, and it increases lines as well. So because, you know, a younger person, they'll make a facial expression where collagen is really springy, so it'll pop back. Acupuncture induces inflammation, and so inflammation does tend to degrade the collagen quite quickly. So you're basically putting a whole buttload of needles in the face. Inflammation gets globally, or the face inflames globally. Not horribly, not quite like as bad as an acid peel or something like that, but there's inflammation. The inflammation degrades the collagen matrix, and then the collagen matrix has to rebuild itself. It rebuilds itself with fewer connections. So the facial acupuncture gets, so the acupuncture face gets like springier and so forth after it rebuilds. So it's actually quite a lovely procedure. Oh, there's me. So this is kind of, I'm showing you guys this photo, but I can't distribute this on the internet because of everything. You can kind of see, like, you know, we're doing it all over. And I actually felt really good after doing this. Like, I thought my face looked younger, and I look really young already. So that was me. I love facial acupuncture. It's just the funnest thing.
How often did you do that?
We'll get in. That's coming up. So here's some examples before and after. So this is from my teacher's website, Martha Lucas. So you can see, so left is before, right is afterwards. Here's another one. You can see the lines are actually quite a bit less deep. And there's another one. So that one you can actually see a pretty dramatic change. So it's a case presentation. It's a young male in his 30s, and he's got really bad acne scarring. So still having outbreaks too. So this is just his thing that he has, is his skin. So here's a picture of him. So you can see, like, it's not showing up that great. You can see there's quite a bit of acne still, and you can't see them that well, but there's a bunch of little, like, scarring pits there. So what did we do? We balanced his overall system. We did cease therapy. So cease therapy is an advanced detoxification procedure, and you can use it to deal with, for instance, if you've had a toxic exposure to a specific chemical or a specific drug you've never really gotten better from, or an illness. So in this case, we gave him a bacteria or a homeopathic remedy made from Propionibacterium acnes that really can, like, if your body's still having scars and sequelae from that, it can really help your body to regenerate it, and that worked wonders for him. Every time he took the remedy, he would get like a tiny little outbreak, and then it would get better than before. So his body was just clearing the damage. And we did 10 sessions of facial acupuncture. Different lighting, I know, but basically, so I'm sorry I moved clinics in the meantime, but acne scarring was decreased by about 40%. Crow's feet and lines were gone, and acne was decreased by about 50%. So I want to get better photos because we're still kind of finishing up with the cease therapy, but we probably took, and he was like 34, we took about 5 or 6 years off of his face. So He's 34. It's like not a lot to take off. So I was actually super impressed by that. So lines of, and his skin is generally less inflamed. So I was really happy with that. So I know protocols personally for abdomen, face, and neck. So there's two more that I kind of wanted to do. There's like a breast cosmetic acupuncture, and I swear to God, if you had developed a butt cosmetic acupuncture and you started selling that to gay men, you would make so much money. But I have nobody's done that yet. But I know those three. And a complete protocol is, is 10 visits. I prefer to do an hour twice a week, but we can do 1 hour once a week if just like, it's a bit, so it's kind of a thing. It's a bit cheaper than a lot of the Botox procedures. It is healthier, but there's a greater investment. So that's unfortunately it. The normal cost is $1,500. If the whole program together is $1,350. And there we go. That is my contact information. So if anyone wants me to email this presentation to them, just give me an email at drpalterio.md@gmail.com. I am looking for somebody to do cosmetic acupuncture for because I want photos for my website. So that person was super awesome. He was like, yeah, I'll do it for you. I'll let you put them on my website and use them in presentations and things. So what I'm looking for someone, like I've got a face person, I've got an abdomen person. I need someone with like a neck thing. Particularly people who have like saggy skin on their neck. I would so love that. So I'd give that person if they wanted, if you've not got someone or you want someone you know to do that, I'd give them a 50% discount. So you get like the $1,350 protocol for $626, $6 something. I'm not good at math. Math is hard, as we say in Alberta. And then we do that. I just would want to use your photographs on my website to demonstrate how this works. Because, you know, I can talk about this a lot, but it's like, oh, a picture. Like, that will tell you a lot more what's better. So, yeah, no. So that's kind of that. In addition to cosmetic acupuncture protocol, like when we're doing this, I'm always like, how's your digestion doing? How's this doing? How's that? So because I'm a naturopathic doctor, I'll often throw in extra stuff. So I'm starting to add into that as well. Like I'm probably going to start doing mesotherapy. So mesotherapy is the direct injection of things into your face that promote, and it's not quite the same thing as injecting Botox. You're injecting things that just promote regeneration and skin bettering and so forth. So I'm going to add that in at some point. Yeah, because this is, as I said, I'm really young looking, so a number of people would come to me and they would kind of not think I knew what I was talking about because I look so young. But this works to my advantage if I'm doing cosmetic work. So, yeah.
Just a question
Yes.
thought of. So with like the collagen regeneration acupuncture, what are your thoughts on combining that with collagen supplements? I know
Okay.
with the collagen supplements, I'm wondering how effective you think